Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Do not go gentle. The case against assisted death is being described as a bracing, often chilling wrestle with the ethical dilemmas surrounding the assisted death service. A deeply unsettling read, clear and powerful. Is there a right to die? Is assisted death really compassionate? And are we sleepwalking into a moral disaster? It's a tricky subject, and the woman who has decided to go and write about this and put forward the case against assisted death is Kathleen Stocker. Delighted to say that Kathleen joins me live on the line now. Kathleen, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It is a subject that is obviously something that we will all have to face at one point or other, towards the end of our life. Many of us are hoping that, they always say, I would like to go quietly in my bed, etc., and not know anything about it. But the stark reality is that many of us may be forced to maybe stuck in a situation where it is the quality of life rather than the quantity of life that we should perhaps be looking at. And of course, you take the do not go gentle from, isn't it? Rage rates against the dying of the light. So what is your sort of what's your standing point, your chispa, as we'd say over here, behind that?
Well, my starting point is to think that we really need to think carefully about what happens to a society when you bring in assisted death by doctors to solve the problem of pain and suffering. And let's be clear, it's not just natural death. There's poison administered either intravenously or in a cup. It's either self-administered, in which case I think we should call that suicide, or it's voluntary euthanasia. But either way, it's not natural. So the question isn't just what happens for that person. It's what happens for everybody else once that is advertised by the National Health Service or whichever public health service as a good thing that you can have as an alternative to palliative care, as an alternative to hospice care. It is now in the system. What happens to the system? And what I go through in the book is, I think lots of bad things happen to the system, including that we actually stop funding other alternatives which are more expensive. So actually, in effect, it pushes people towards this option once it's available, because then becomes less money for other, like palliative care, hospice care, which is already underfunded.
There is the argument of people saying, it has been front and center of a lot of, the Daily Express has been running this campaign about, dignity and the right to die. They're trying to push that legislation through, the various houses of Lords and Parliament, etc. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, people who are terminally ill are saying, well, we want to go with dignity, etc. Can you kind of see their point of view? And are we arguing?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, of course. I mean, I think the thing is, both sides in this dispute, as it were, want people to have a good death. I certainly do. But really, I would say that the introduction of assisted death as a means of having that, as opposed to funding proper palliative care, properly supporting the hospice movement, because, these technologies are available now that were never available 50 years ago. They really do have a good handle on pain control if it's funded properly. So I would say that the introduction of assisted death is a failure of medicine to deal with this problem, and a very depressing one. But it's not that none of us want people to suffer. We just disagree about. So they think that nothing bad will happen, that basically you can just get doctors to start advising people that they might want an assisted death and there'll be no knock-on consequences. And I think that is completely naive. I think for one thing, it'll make some people terrified of going to the doctor at all, because now the doctor could be basically suggesting that you die soon. And that's not what we want doctors for.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is the fact that, if anything has taught us over that thing of which we no longer speak that happened 6 years ago when we couldn't get out of our houses. But it is the situation where, that's why I call it that thing of which we no longer speak. But it is the thing that, I suppose, our parents had to put their trust in the medical profession, and that nothing, what a doctor said was sacrosanct. There was nothing, you didn't argue with doctors. However, because of various factors, and I'm not, I'm absolutely not saying, my family, I've got surgeons, I've got nurses in my family, whatever, but there is a lack of funding. The things are overstretched, and if you only have to look at the huge opioid crisis that you have in the States at the moment, with doctors prescribing pills to solve everything, and so it wouldn't be a huge stretch of the imagination to say, well, an overstretched doctor might think, well, we can prescribe this or other, but it would get this is sound very facile, and I don't mean it to sound, but they might say, okay, well, have you looked at this option? And that would be the option.
They would, and to be honest, that's what the system wants. That's what we would be legislating for. You can't just have it and then say it's not a good thing. Once you've got it. There was an impact study done by Starmer's government about what it would look like if we had it. And they said there would have to be a massive advertising campaign, a massive public awareness campaign, so everyone would know about it. The doctor will be able to bring it up as many times as he or she likes. So, yeah, you're not going to get it, but say, oh, it's not very good. Once you get it, we will have it, and it will become an option for everyone, whether they want it or not. So, and that's the problem. Like, there's people at home who want to live for as long as possible. They want to have good palliative care. They want to be, to die a natural death. And suddenly they will have to defend to themselves and to their relatives potentially why they're not going early, why the care home fees are going to be their inheritance is going to be spent on care home fees or whatever. That's going to create an interesting dynamic in certain families. All of that is going to change for everybody, not just the people that want it. So it's presented as something only affects those that want it. And I'm saying, no. It's going to affect everybody because we're all going to have that choice now. Plus, there's the issue of coercion, which I just sort of lightly alluded to. We're never going to be able to tell if people really wanted this because the system will be an hour's Zoom with a couple of doctors and then a panel, but they're not going to be able to scrutinise your background, look at your financial situation, look at whether there's ever been any domestic abuse in your family, and none of that. So basically, it's a mechanism to solve the problem of people living a lot longer. It may not be presented as that, but that's what I suspect it will become.
And should we, as you say, this is, do not go gentle. Should we be raging? Should we be trying every available option? Should we, because, and I'm not trying to say that there's in terms of we should be prolonging life.
Oh no, I see. The title is really "Do Not Go Gentle." Let's not sleepwalk into assisted death as a systematic option. I actually think that we are too keen to prolong life in certain cases. We should have a better conversation about what a good life looks like, and it's not necessarily one on your 7th round of chemotherapy aged 70 or whatever. Sure. But that's a different question because withdrawing treatment and managing the dying process with pain control is not the same as killing. And the assisted death lobby want us to think of those things as the same. They say, well, we already withdraw treatment, so what's the difference between that and giving someone some poison? Well, there's actually a big difference when the doctor is doing it. And I want us to hang on to that because dying and killing are not the same thing.
Of course, when you approach a subject like this, everybody's got an investment in this. Everybody's got a dog in this fight because we are all going to die. Okay,
yes.
Like it or lump it. It is the final curtain, and I won't break into Sinatra. But the thing with this is, of course, that when you bring this one is because this is the greatest taboo. We do not speak about this until we are literally on death's door. Okay,
yeah,
so we put it away. We kick the can down the road, and it is the uncomfortable truth. And every other aspect we could look at in our lives, we would perhaps most of us look at it rationally, take an informed decision, whatever. If you question something like this and put forward the points that you've raised, which are valid points, emotions come into it in a way that you get swept in this sort of like this tsunami of emotional sort of investment in it. So why did you want to put your head above the parapet, Kathleen?
Well, I'm already quite used to going into controversial debates and tsunamis of emotion.
Yes.
And actually, so I've been involved in discussing gender, which is an extremely contentious topic with lots and lots of strong feelings. This is a walk in the park compared to that, to be honest. I'm very used to being told I'm cruel and I'm a horrible person. So that's not going to make any difference. I'm not a cruel and horrible person.
Welcome to my world, by the way. As a radio presenter, I get to call that most days, but there you go.
Well, it bounces off. But, this is a really important question. And you're right. We don't think enough about death. We're in denial about it, especially with a health-obsessed culture. And we don't know what a good death looks like necessarily. We might know what a bad death looks like because of the lack of funding, the fact that, the hospices are 30% funded by the the exchequer and the rest is voluntary. I mean, that's a crazy situation, especially with longevity as it is, and it's increasing. So, and dementia is increasing. So we've really got to tackle this. We've got to have a conversation about it without this sort of looming axe falling over of assisted death as like the solution that will solve all this complexity. I think it will make things worse.
So, I mean, this is, again, this is a problem. It's only going to get more current because, in Europe, we are the demographic. We are becoming, those of us who are Generation Xers, we are seeing our parents who are now in their 80s and 90s. They weren't, and their parents, if you got to 65, back in the day, that was okay. You're going to pick up your golf clubs and, you'll last 5 years if you're lucky. Of course, now 65, it's the 65 is the new 40. So we have to look at this situation.
We have to. And, I don't shy away in the book from those elements. We are living longer. We are surviving things like cancer longer, and dementia is on the increase. At the same time, I'm afraid the birth rate is dropping. So there will be a pensions crisis soon, because the economy needs enough working people to support the people at the top end, and there won't be enough people. So there's all sorts of very complex problems. But what I'm urging us is not to introduce inadvertently even a kind of very simplifying mechanism which could radically transform the way we relate to old and vulnerable and ill people in future, starting basically to see them as a drain on public resources, and what starts off as a right can become a duty. And that's what I really don't want to see. I don't want to see a world in 50 years' time where basically there's subtle and not so subtle pressures on people who are dying anyway, as the assisted death lobby would say, to go before their time. I think that would be a brutal society, one that would be completely unrecognizable to the one that I live in now. And I don't want to live there.
Who did you speak to? I mean, where did you sort of gather the information, and who did you speak to when you were putting this together?
Well, I spoke to palliative care doctors who mostly are very much against this because they recognise, so they work with dying people, and they recognise, first of all, they know what death looks like. They know what a good death looks like. And they also recognise that this is not, this is going to be a rival to palliative care effectively because it's cheaper. I spoke to lawyers and read a lot about how this happens in other countries, how it tends to slip into the legal systems, how it just affects the whole. And I've got lived experience of elderly relatives and illness just like everybody else. So I've got that to bring to bear. But I just read a lot. I read an awful lot about, because all you hear is rosy stories about how this is a kind of rainbow bridge or whatever, golden bridge. Everyone floating away. Relatives are always happy, but actually it's not true. Relatives are not always happy. And mostly they have no say whatsoever in it. So someone can just say, I'm going tomorrow. They don't even have to tell the relatives. And then they could just suddenly be told that's happened. There's a great worry for the disabled people, because disabled people who don't have terminal illness are still often incapacitated, living in pain. They share a lot of features with terminal illness, so it tends to affect society's attitudes towards them too. I spoke to domestic abuse campaigners who are very worried that this is going to be a way in which people in intolerable domestic situations can just have an easy way out. There's just many, many dimensions here. And
when you do look at the sort of, again, in certain sections of the press where we go, we had to go to Switzerland, we had to go to here because so-and-so couldn't end their life in a dignified way. They do tend to be, shall we say, sort of white, middle upper class, solvent, etc., etc. You don't get an awful lot if you're just looking at a wide section of that certain bits of the press were reporting. You don't get an awful lot of people from ethnic backgrounds going there. You don't get a lower class people going there. And this, so the problem here is, Kathleen, that you may see people who aren't in that particular set, i.e., Mr. and Mrs. relatively normal, if you like, from that set in Daily Express, Daily Mail reading classes. But you might see it is easier. We've seen this in every other targeting in the medical issue of people from ethnic backgrounds and on the poverty line, not getting the care they deserve.
Well, you're absolutely right that the people that tend to push this are moneyed, famous example being Esther Rantzen, Prue Leith, they're really all for it. But so for them, it's just another choice to add to their many choices in life. But they also tend to say, oh, look, this is a problem of equality, because people that don't have enough money to go to Switzerland, they should be able to have a homegrown option, as it were. I don't think that's true. I think other countries do what they like, but, some people I know have enough money to go to Turkey for dental implants or butt lifts or whatever. But, it doesn't mean we have to do exactly what they do. And you're right that so there was a very worrying thing in that impact study that I mentioned about, it talked about ethnic minorities. And this impact study on assisted death published by the Labour government said, look, we need to make sure that ethnic minorities have access to this. But ethnic minority studies have shown apparently often have fewer forms of ID. So let's lower the requirements on ID for ethnic minorities. It also said learning disabled people, how are we going to get them involved? Well, we're going to give them an easy read version of the guidelines, So once it's presented as a good thing, I can't stop stressing this, it will be treated that way, and it will be thought of as like extra access to medicine or extra access to some other good thing. So it will be made sure that ethnic minorities, learning disabled people, marginalized communities, they have equal access, and they might even get a little help into assisted death programs, as it were, to kind of compensate for the imbalance. And that, this seems to me incredibly dystopian to be talking that way, but that's how it goes.
And this is something you can't say, oh, sorry about that, in 5 years' time. We didn't really mean, because there's no coming back from this, is there?
They won't come back.
Yeah.
They won't be able to say, I'm sorry, I think that was the wrong thing for me. They won't be here.
So, what's the sort of feedback been? I mean, I know you said before you've put your head above the parapet before, so you've got you're thicker than an African rhino with an overcoat on. But how does because I'm going to phrase this the right way. Are you putting yourself up there to say, look, I've already been had things. I've already had Rotten Tomatoes thrown at me from my previous views. But this, I'm not saying are you, because if I say you're a champion of common sense, that is proper express speak. Shut up.
Oh, I like it.
But you see what I'm saying here, because in a word where and I like I said before, Gen Xers, etc. We sort of see things and say things because we haven't been influenced by social media. And trust me, if you've got kids or goddaughters, whatever, I'm forever being told that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm a fossil. But it just seems that we need to have a rational debate, and we need to say to people, look, these are the options. We should be throwing money at palliative care, at state hospices, and decent ones to provide. That's a dignified life, not not going through a door and then not coming back again in the UK.
I think so. I mean, Dame Cicely Saunders started the hospice movement in Britain, in London. It's actually a jewel in the national crown that we started that. She said, you matter, our ethos is you matter right up until the last moment of your life. Compare that to the assisted death lobby, who say things like, look, you're dying anyway. Basically, as soon as you've got a terminal prognosis, you're dying anyway. So at that point, they don't even want to call it suicide anymore. And I think, no, you're not dying anyway. You could be dying for years.
Well, we're all dying. I mean, technically, we're all dying.
Yeah, but I mean, some people are dying faster than others. But even when there's only 4 months to go, you're still living. Yeah. So I think we need to concentrate on the living bit and what the living bit looks like. And I don't think that bringing assisted death in encourages us to do that. But in answer to your question, the feedback's been okay, because I think most people, when they've got a knee-jerk sort of, oh yeah, that sounds like a compassionate option, they just haven't really thought about it. They also think there'll be all these safeguards in the system that in fact there never are, because they're always like treated as obstacles to freedom and choice. So they imagine a perfect system and think, oh, I'd like that. But then when you explain to them actually the systems that most countries have, which are really awful, like terrible things are happening, like homeless people are going, mentally ill people are going, disabled people are going, it's very far from the ideal. Then I think once you spell all that out, people see it. They're not crazy. And it was the same with the previous debate I was in. When you actually explain what's going on, people have got common sense, like you say.
The only thing I would say about the previous thing you're involved in, I've got a friend who's got a big factory in Germany, and he turned up with a book he had with 57 different rules and regulations and types, and he said, I won't use the exact words, but in a very German accent, he said, do I have to provide something bathrooms for all 57 varieties, which was, but that's just a Generation X thing as well. I mean, the other thing is, I just want to touch back on this point. You know, we're painted this picture that it will take. This is not a knee-jerk reaction in terms of this will be properly thought through. But you just, in terms of when they assess people, but. This will be done on this, as you said. This will be done on Zoom. People will be overworked, and
possibly,
you can see the situation, can't you? You can see this happening because we're overstaffed. It's far easier to if you're thinking they should be registered dying, you're already halfway there, and that can take into mental, as you said, there could be history of abuse, mental illness, alcoholism, drug addiction, the whole 9 yards here. Which an overworked GP or an overworked panel of experts may be unable to fathom. In the time takes.
Absolutely. So I think early on, people were thinking of assisted death as like, your family doctor that knows you really well will be exactly right moment. But I don't know when the last time you met a doctor that you've seen before, you never meet the same doctor twice. They are very bad, actually, doctors generally at saying no to people for sick notes and things like that. I don't see. On what grounds would they even argue with somebody? If they've got the right prognosis and this person is saying, I want assisted death, and the system says you can have it, then the doctor is not going to say, on average, the doctor is unlikely to say, well, no, you can't. So the system that we nearly got in the UK wouldn't have even asked questions about what your background was. It would have just assumed that you knew what you were doing, perfectly autonomous. You bear the responsibility of it.
Sorry.
Go on.
Just got a WhatsApp in from one of the listeners saying, well done and thank you, Kathleen, for raising awareness on this controversial subject. I've been on stage 4 cancer for 7 years and I'd quite like to keep going.
Good on you. Yeah, good on you.
What are you hoping that people are going to take from your book?
Well, I hope they come away with a very sober... I mean, it's not all... I try and write it in a sort of... It's not the most depressing read ever, but it is obviously dealing with difficult things in some cases. But I hope people come away with a better overview on what this means. And it's not an easy fix. And it's, look beyond the mantras and the fantasies of rosy
rainbow
departings
bridges
and see what actually happens on the ground in the systems we have, stretched as they are, and then start lobbying for better palliative care and better hospice care.
The book is called Do Not Go Gentle, The Case Against Assisted Death. It's by Kathleen Stock. Kathleen, if people want to find you online, I mean, you're relatively easy to find, I would imagine.
I am a contributing editor at Unheard, where I publish a column once a week. That's an online magazine. Just look for UNHERD. I'm also on Twitter as Doc Stock with the 2 Ks at the end.
Doc Stock and 2 smoking barrels, indeed. The book is called Do Not Go Gentle. It's by the excellent Kathleen Stock. Kathleen, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.